Welcome to one of the most listened to music news podcasts in the world, SGNP, with your host, Darren Sutherland. Join us as we talk with industry leaders, artists, and entertainers about their faith, family, and careers. This is information you will not find anywhere else on radio, web, or in a magazine, but only firsthand on SGNP.
And welcome once again to SGNP. Darren Sutherland and my co-host Arthur Rice of the Kingdom Heirs. He's back at work. He's back at Dollywood. He's back singing gospel music at home. He's back sleeping in his own bed. He's back playing golf in his own park. And he's out having fun. Arthur, what's going on?
Hey, man, not much. Enjoying getting settled in back home. Glad Dollywood's open. And, a year ago, here, it was the world just went on pause. God hit the pause button. So we're grateful to be back to work and everything's going good. It really is.
We got a treat for folks today. And folks, we've already recorded the interview before we recorded this intro. So I'm going to just tell you a little truth. We go to church today. Okay. We really, truly do. If you need a blessing and you've thought in your life, you don't know why you're going down the road you're going down, wait till you hear our guest today. Wouldn't you agree, Arthur?
Absolutely. It's going to be a blessing to a lot of people.
Yeah. A lot of groups out there know this fella. And a lot of people have wondered where he's been over the past 25 years. Well, if you've heard of the group Heaven Bound, no doubt you've heard of our guest, Jeff Gibson. Jeff's going to join us in just a minute. And Jeff had a horrendous accident that almost changed his life. It did change his life from the trajectory of being a gospel music artist and somebody that traveled up and down the road. But the impact he has had since then may far outweigh any impact he ever had in gospel music. And I think you're going to want to hear this. Just because he may not have the nationwide notoriety he had at a younger age, he's had a hyper-local impact, Arthur, that's astounding. And I think people's going to find it very, very interesting. What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Doubt. No doubt. And then coming back after that, Arthur's going to tell us a little bit this afternoon about the Kingdom Heirs new tenor and everything that's going on with those guys. Hey, if you want to check us out, make sure you do so on our Facebook page, Southern Gospel News Podcast. You can always find us there on that podcast. You can also look at our friend Jeff Turner. Now, I've got to hand this to Jeff Turner. Jeff's a great friend of the show. He's probably the premier Southern Gospel, one of the premier Southern Gospel historians in the world, and probably has access to more pictures of groups than anybody I've ever known. But Jeff set this interview up today with Jeff Gibson for us, and we really appreciate that. But check us out on Facebook, check us out on Instagram. Go back to Southern Gospel News Podcast, listen to a bunch of our shows. You'll get a blessing out of them. But Arthur, this is the man that wrote that song. And what I found out interesting about this song was it never went number one, but it was Song of the Year. Canaan Land is just in sight. That's funny, ain't it? The song never went number one, but it was Song of the Year. So it's a good thing. So we're going to take a quick break. We're going to come right back. We're going to talk to Jeff Gibson on SGNP. Hey, this is Darren, and I'm here for my buddy Mike Lindell and My Pillow. That's right, My Pillow. I got to tell you a little secret, and this is a true story. The other day I'm laying in the bed. I looked at Mary and I said, I'm going to get me some new pillows today. She said, what do you need with new pillows? You got them. I said, I got one that's decent. And I didn't know which one it was. I mean, I knew which one it was, and I pulled the cover off of it, and it was only My Pillow. The rest of them were these ones that we bought from TJ Maxx or Target or Walmart or somewhere that just had worn out their welcome. And you know what, guys? I feel like I needed new pillows. And she said, well, why don't you call My Pillow, because you like the one you got there, and tell them what you're looking for, and they'll help you out. You know what? I called, and guess what? They helped me out. They asked me what size I was. They asked me how I slept. Did I sleep on my back or on my side or on my stomach? What felt right? Feathers or, blah, 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 foam. They asked me all these questions. More questions than I ever dreamed about a pillow, and I got my new My Pillow in the mail, and I've slept right. You want that change in your life? It's real simple. 1-800-338-2330, 1-800-338-2330. Use the code word SGNP. That's right, the code word SGNP. And tell them you heard about this special offer. And when you use that code, you'll get a great discount from the folks at My Pillow. I use My Pillow. You should too. 1-800-338-2330. Use the code SGNP. My Pillow, the official pillow and sleep provider of Southern Gospel News Podcast.
Hey guys, this is Mike Rigglesworth from the Caffeinated Christian Podcast. We want to let you know that the Caffeinated Christian is about providing thoughtful and charitable conversations around pressing cultural issues and personal stories, all explored through the lens of a Christian worldview. The topics we talk about range from human sexuality to racial injustice. We even get into topics such as aliens. The guys over here at the Caffeinated Christian regularly bring in guests that encourage listeners to think hard, which will challenge or perhaps even change their worldview. Like and subscribe to the Caffeinated Christian Podcasts wherever you download your podcast today.
Moses led God's children 40 years. He led them through the cold and through the night. Oh, they said, let's turn back
welcome back to SGNP. You heard the music, you heard the song. You know what it is, folks. Canaan Land is just in sight. Joining us today at Southern Gospel News Podcast is a name a lot of you know. And Arthur, I would venture to say we're going to have more artists listen to us and more industry people listen to us than ever before, because folks are going to want to know where our guest has been the last 20 or so years and what he's been doing, because they all love him. And he was a household name in the gospel music world. Heaven bound's Mr. Jeff Gibson. Jeff, how are you doing, my friend?
I'm good, Brother Darren, Brother Arthur. Good to be with you. I'm just tickled to be here, and thank you for having me today.
Man, this is fun. This is fun for me, especially because, Jeff, I always tell folks that I feel like I've always just been a fan. Even though I get to sit on this side of the mic and I get to interview folks and we get to love and talk and find out stuff. But man, I remember back in the heydays of the 80s, you know, Heaven Bound, for folks that don't realize this, was the original male trio of gospel music, so to speak, before Greater Vision.
We were very blessed, very blessed. A lot of big, wonderful people like Ben Spear and JD and others would kid us all the time. You guys need a bass singer, but then they'd say, come to me afterwards, say, y'all don't need a bass singer. You don't need
you know, the thing about it was back in the day, tell the truth, Jeff, was it that you didn't want a bass singer, or it was just easier traveling with 3 people on a bus rather than 4 people?
It was just easier traveling. It really was. Plus, it had it where we had something new on our program every night, because whoever we were with, if we were with the Kingsmen, sometime in there, Ray Dean would come out, and then the rest of the Kingsmen. If we were with the Cathedrals, George Johnson would come out, JD would. So it always left where we had something cool we could add to our program each night, because we used everybody's bass singers. Yeah. And we didn't have to pay them.
That's cool. Jeff, where you been? What you been doing? I mean,
well, I've been off. I was on the road, Darren, for right at almost 25 years. And of course, after my horse accident, came home. And, you know, the Lord is just so far ahead of us. He's way ahead. Doing that 25 years, when we were off for the summer, I had both of my degrees were in music. And so when we were off for the summer, I'd go back and take a class. And the guys would ask me all the time. Ben Spear asked me one time, he said, I heard, we were at the Stamp School of Music. And he said, I heard you go take a class during the summer. I said, I do. He said, why? I said, I keep my teaching license up because you never know when you're going to need it. I said, my dad always taught me to have a backup plan. And so when I came off the road, I was just writing for everybody for a while. And I had several churches offer me jobs as minister of music, but I did not feel the calling to do that. And so the superintendent of schools of the state called me and said, I hear you're not traveling. Would you set up some music programs in our schools? And I said, sure. And so I got in there and got involved with the schools and just absolutely loved it, and just finished 25 years of doing that. I had a DJ call me one day, Darren, from Texas, and he said, Brother Jeff, what are you doing? I said, I've been called into the mission field. And he said, where? I said, public school. That is a mission field. And so I've had a wonderful, wonderful career. I've been very blessed, but my heart is always in gospel music. That's where I told Arthur the other night. It's just, that's where I've always been. Where my heart is, that's my first call. And I'm never happier than when I'm on stage and singing and ministering, playing and writing. That'll always be my first love. And you know, I don't understand, again, Arthur and I talked about this the other night, I don't understand why the accident happened and why I ended up coming off the road. But the Lord says all things happen for the good. And I trust his word. He has a purpose in everything we do. We don't understand it, but God is so faithful. Even when we're not, he's faithful.
Jeff, let's back up some, because a lot of our listeners know you, but a lot of our listeners may not know the Jeff Gibson story. Tell the folks a little bit about Jeff Gibson, how he got involved in gospel music, and then the accident, and what led you to go into the teaching profession that you just were talking about.
Sure, Brother Darren. Well, I've always been involved in church. My mama has 9 brothers, and every one of them pastored churches. So it was like I was raised in youth camp my whole life, and I just was always involved in music. I fully planned to be a band teacher or a choral teacher. And when I was in college, one night, of course, I had always sang, I always had a little group here and there. And one night we'd gone to dinner up at the cafeteria at the college, and some of my friends came up and they said, man, we cannot believe you're sitting up here. I said, why? They said, there's a gospel group out on campus going to play live tonight. Well, I left my plate, didn't even put my plate up. I shot out of there, got down to mid-campus, and they were setting up. Their bus had broken down, which Arthur, well, you said that, aren't we, buddy? So they didn't have a bus with them. They had a van, a trailer, and I just kind of watched them set up the equipment. And I looked in the trailer and saw a set of drums, and Ken was over there playing the piano, and God knows he was forevermore playing. And I walked over and I said, man, you can play. And we talked a minute, and I said, where's your drummer? And he said, he's having wisdom teeth pulled tonight. And I said, well, I'm a percussion brass. I'm double major percussion and brass. I said, I'll be glad to play with you. And Ken said, do you know gospel music? I said, Lord, yeah. Long story short, they said he had never let anybody sit in. I sat in that night, had a great time. And 3 days later, they were knocking on my dorm door and said, would you be interested in joining us? And they were with a group called the Foundations. I went with them, and the next week we were with the Hoppers and the Spears. And I thought, man alive, this is it. And about a year later, 4 of us decided to pull out. We wanted to go a different direction, and we formed Heaven Bound. So I moved from the drums to singing, and we at that time we had a bass player. It was actually 5 of us. But then when we started going full time, it wasn't what he wanted to do. So that's when I had learned in string class how to play bass. So I said, well, I'll play bass till we get somebody. And then I just fell in love with it. So I began to play the bass. So we were down to 4, and God was just blessing. He started pouring the songs on me, and I was so grateful. And we were working hard. And then one day I was home. It was rare, and Arthur will identify with this, and all the artists that are listening, it's rare to have a Sunday home. But I had a Sunday home and had gone to my home church with my wife and kids, and the pastor was speaking about the children of Israel in Canaan land, and he just commented several times, I can almost see Canaan land. I can almost see it, folks. And he was getting cranked up, and the thought just hit me, Canaan land is just in sight. So I sat there and wrote the verses and the chorus and had the melody. When church dismissed, I walked by Ken and Alan, and I said, guys, I've got a new song I think it's pretty good. And Ken said, well, that's fine. Don't forget to be at the bus at 3. We got a date tonight. So when we got to the church that evening, Ken said, sing me a line of that song. So I sung him a little bit, and he said, ho, and he went and got Lawrence and Alan. He said, get around the piano. We learned it real quick and sang it that night. And I'm telling you, the Lord did forevermore move. And Ken said, we need to get in the studio. We had just signed with a Calvary Records, us and the Hensons, a couple of other groups. We went right on to the studio. And when we made the album, Darren, and Arthur probably knows this, they weren't excited. The president, wonderful gentleman, I love him to death, Brother Nelson Parkinson, but they did not pick Canaan Land as a single. And we were like, I'm telling you, on the road, this thing, the Lord is using this thing. Well, the Henson's manager, Wayne Gaskin, was in the Calvary building. He comes to us and said, guys, I've heard that project, and I'm telling you, that needs to be the single. And I said, we agree. He said, well, I'm thinking about Ronnie Drake and I leaving to start a new record company called Wind Chime Records. And he said, we'd love to have y'all as our premier group. So we went to Brother Parkinson, worked out a situation where we bought our master, went with Wind Chime. They pressed and released Canaan Land, and God just blessed. Canaan Land moved and moved. It was one that we were told it was the only time at that point that a song had been on the chart at the same time by 3 groups. We had it on there, and the Florida Boys had it on there, and the Dixie Melody Boys had it on there. So we were so blessed. And then God followed that, gave me Where Are Those Children? And then I know my God can do it, and I am with thee, and can the world see Jesus in you? And every once in a while, he'd sprinkle some in there for me to hand to the Kingsmen, like go and tell somebody, and songs like that. And so God was just so faithful. The timing was amazing, and I planned on doing it my entire life. It is my first love, and sometimes I can't hardly talk about it because I love it so much and miss it. I miss people like Arthur, dear friends like Arthur, and so many others. But I was home one week and was working training a horse for a fella. I'd always had horses, and a little boy come running around the stable, and the horse reared up, and he was going to come down on that boy. So I just yanked him, and when I yanked him, he turned a somersault and landed on top of me. And I don't remember too much after that, except they were loading me up to fly me off. And I broke my back in 3 places and several ribs. And they told me all the way I'd never walk. And my wife, bless her heart, was hollering and screaming, he is going to walk. And she was praying her heart out. That was on the Monday, Darren. And on Wednesday, they counted at one time 342 pastors from 17 states that had come, and they lined down the halls of that hospital, just trusting God and praying. I'm sorry, brethren.
Help yourself.
That was on Wednesday. On Thursday, thank you, Master. That was on Thursday. I asked the nurse, trying to get myself together here, guys. I asked the nurse, I said,
Take your time.
can you let me get out of bed? Had been hanging upside down in traction for 3 or 4 days in a body cast they had poured and put on me. And she said, Mr. Gibson, you can't get out of bed. I said, well, just let me sit up. So she set me up, and I said, can you get me a walker? And she said, Mr. Gibson, I can't. Well, anyway, she got me a walker. When I stood up, I had been hanging upside down for 3 days, and all the blood rushed to my head. I passed out, fell right on the bed. And so when I woke up, my wife was crying, and she said, honey, don't do that again. And I got up and got on that walker, and I declare it was the Lord just entered that room. I started walking out in that hall. The doctors and nurses were clapping and crying and screaming, and they just couldn't believe it. And long story short, they had told me I'd be in the hospital about 3 months, and I was in the hospital 4.5 days. The next day, he come to me and said, gave me like 10 sheets stapled together, and it was my physical therapy. He said, when you can do all this, you can go home. And I flipped to the last page, and it said, walk it up and down a flight of stairs. And I said, have you got a flight of stairs? And he said, we got the fire escape. I went out there and walked up and down them stairs. He said, son, you can go home. I was in a body cast, but I went home, and God was so faithful. The Lord brought me through, and went back on the road. And, my doctor told me then, he said, son, you're young and you feel good right now, but as you get older, it's going to get tough. Well, it was already tough. There were times I went on stage and I had a smaller brace under my suit, and I'd go get back in the bed on the bus and just couldn't move. And I'd get up the next day and go on stage. And finally, my doctor and sweet Becky Simmons at Century 2, she come to me and said, Jeff, I do not ever want to see you give this up, but you can't live like this. And she was right. And so I prayed about it, counseled with my pastor and several friends, and I just knew it was time. So stepped off the road and have missed it ever since. But God has been absolutely faithful. I apologize taking so much time. Talking about the Lord is just hard, but I'm sorry. I didn't mean to.
No, you don't apologize. We ain't on radio. We can sit here as long as we want. You know what I'm saying?
Well, thank the Lord. I appreciate that.
This is a podcast. I mean, if people don't like it, turn it off right now. Okay. If they ain't got a blessing, they probably ain't right to begin with, and they probably need to just stop right now and get their heart right. Don't you think, Arthur?
Oh, Darren, preach it, brother, preach it.
I mean, it's just the way it is. Arthur, what you got?
That's right. Man. Those almost 25 years was just the most precious time of my life, and to meet so many wonderful people. I get emails daily from fans and friends over the years, and pastors, and to meet people like Arthur. And I've said it behind his back, and I'll say it in front of his face. He's the same on and off stage. Yeah. They don't come any truer than Arthur Rice. To have a friend like that is a friend indeed, and I'm blessed that I can call him my friend. And to know people like that, and for God to have blessed me to have people like that in my life, I could never thank him for need another thing. He's been so good to me. But Lord, I miss it. God knows I miss it.
I remember the first time we worked with you guys, I was with the Kingsmen, and it was y'all just came on, you just tore it up, and it was like, man, live we came out, and all the guys standing around was like, who are these guys? Because we hadn't really been around you that much, and then of course Foxy just fell in love with you guys.
Yeah, he was a good man.
And we been there for years. We worked with you almost every weekend.
We were fortunate that by then we had gone with the Benson Company, who y'all were with, and so us and the Kingsmen were on the same label, the same booking agency. And thank the Lord, we would together 2 or 3 nights every week. And I'll never forget the first time, because when we come off stage, I had met Foxy a couple of times and talked, and he was but when he came off that night, he said, I want you to hear my man playing bass. Well, I thought he just meant playing bass. And so I sat there on the side of the stage, and Hamill said, you getting ready to hear something. And the Kingsmen went out, and we had a wonderful stand. I thought, well, thank the Lord, we had a good one. And I was so glad after we didn't have to follow him that night, because Foxy sat there. He said, and I finally looked at Fox and said, well, he's a great bass player. I love his bass player. He goes, you just hold on a few minutes. And I thought, well, about that time, Hamill called Arthur out to sing. And honestly, he sung How Great Thou Art, and I have never I don't know why he's not in the Guinness Book of Records. The way that dude, way he would hold a note several times through there, and I'd look at Fox and say, that's amazing. And he'd say, oh, hold on, you ain't heard nothing yet. And I thought, dear Lord. And when Arthur grabbed that note at the end, and he held on forever and ever. I thought this guy's lungs run from the top of his head to the tip of his toes. I had never, but then when I met him afterwards, he was just so genuine. And of course, over the years, I was blessed to write of the several of the Kingsman songs. And Hamill would always get me. Kingsman groups would come to me and say, "How do you get Kingsman cuts?" And I'd say, "Well, it's totally different. Most groups, you send them a tape or a demo or whatever." I said, with the Kingsman, whenever we work with them, one of the guys will come to the bus and say, "Hamill wants you," and I'll go to the bus, and Hamill will say, "Go get your book." And I knew what he wanted, and I'd go get my book, songs that nobody heard. He said, "All right, start singing." And I'd sing one. If I got through a verse, he'd cut me off. If I got through a verse and a chorus, I thought this one's got a chance. And then several of them I had. And I remember one time, Arthur, I didn't know y'all were going to cut. We would sing a happy song. And then we were with y'all, and us and y'all up there for Larry O'Reilly in Cincinnati and Dayton. And so Hamill that night come to me, and I had given him some songs a month or so before. And he said, "I want you to hear this first song." He said, "Man, we got a killer." And I'm thinking, "Man, I don't want to hear this. You should have done one of mine." But I didn't say that. But so the Kingsmen come out, and Anthony's looking at me grinning, and Anthony and Arthur, they kick off that song. And I thought, "That's my song." And Hamill just turns at me and laughs, and they took off singing one of mine and recorded that. And then they'd go and tell somebody. Hamill would always say, "Just sing it." And if he ever told Anthony to get his little keyboard out that he kept on the bus, you remember that, Arthur?
Yeah.
And if he told Anthony to grab his little keyboard and for me to sing it again, I knew I had a chance. So I was blessed. Yep. The Kingsman was so good to me over the years. I was just very fortunate.
Fun stuff.
Had some great times. We had some great times. Jeff and I talked the other night, and I told him I remember when I left the Kingsman, one of our last dates.
Warner Robins, Georgia.
And we went to eat before the concert, a little seafood place over there. And boy, he's just been such a great friend over the years. And you know, I knew when you had your accident and you left, I was like you. I thought, man, Lord, why would you let something like that happen for you to leave the road? And you know what? I just started praying for you that God would just use you, because I knew what you had in your heart, the love for this music and just singing. But I knew that God had a purpose for you, and you may not know down here what that would have been.
That's
but
right.
God knows.
Exactly right. You're right.
And God knows exactly the ones that you've touched and the young people that you have inspired and have encouraged. And I honestly believe that's probably your greatest ministry,
Arthur,
to this day.
Right. I get letters all the time, man. Lord have mercy, Arthur. You don't know how smart you are, my brother. I get letters from former students, and I got one the other day, and she's 32 now. And when she was in school, she just had a rough time. She had a child at 14 by her stepfather and had a rough life, and tried to commit suicide a couple of times. And I went and sat with her in the hospital, and I kept telling her over and over, "You can make it." And I would pray with my students. I didn't care what school said. I said, "I'll go somewhere else," but I would pray with them. And now that letter the other day, she said, "Mr. Gibson, so many times I wanted to end my life. And, but you held my hand and told me to trust God." And she said, "I have learned, and I'm trying to teach my children to trust God." And she said, "Thank you for saving my life." And I said, "Honey, I didn't do it. I didn't do a thing." But you're right, Arthur. God had a plan. And guys, I didn't know y'all were going to tear me up like this today. But God had a plan, Arthur. You're right. God is so faithful. It's amazing. Absolutely amazing.
Jeff, as I listen to your story and I listen to the way, and I'm going to use this adjective, prepared yourself. There was no doubt on the backside of the veil, God was preparing you for what you needed. Speak to those Christians and those artists out there that have natural talent, that take the easy way and don't prepare themselves, because they're, LeBron James and Michael Jordan could have picked up a basketball and never played high school, and they would still be in the NBA.
That's right. That's right.
So, I believe beyond a shadow of a doubt David Phelps could have never took a music theory class or a voice class,
Absolutely.
and he would have still been a lead. I mean, he would have still been a tenor singer like he is.
Yep.
But Jeff, no doubt you prepared yourself by going to college, studying theory, getting your degree, and it not only helped you in the gospel music profession and in the church life, but it helped you in your career 25 years after 25 years on the road. It helped you
Absolutely
in the education world.
Yeah.
Speak to those guys out there right now who more than ever the past year, and I even hate bringing this up because I'm so tired of talking about COVID and the world we're living in, but it is what it is.
That's right.
You prepared yourself.
Mhm.
If you could speak to those guys and give them wisdom, what would you say to them about preparing themselves musically and preparing themselves for life outside of gospel music?
Well, above all, stay in the Word. You know, the Bible says, study to show thyself approved. And it means in the Word of God, it means in books and any knowledge you can get. I'm a big advocate for education because so many of us think, well, I've got a little gift. I can just jump in here and do it. And Darren, you're right. They think they could. But if they will prepare themselves so that when God opens that door, when God makes a way, I mean, you just don't know what God might have planned for you. And
Right.
if you will take time to get ready, like I said, my dad always called it a backup plan. I remember when I was in college, I had a group that had heard me sing at my church and come to me and said, we'd like to offer you a spot. We don't pay a great salary right now. And Lord, I wanted to go so bad. And I went home, and this is just me. I believe in fasting and prayer. And I fasted a couple of days and I sought the Lord and I said, Father, and all of a sudden it went to that spot in the 23rd Psalm. We all know he leads me in the paths of righteousness. And I said, Lord, just lead me. I want to do the right thing. And so I backed off and didn't take it. And then when God opened the door, I was ready. God had me ready for it. I had sung in church my whole life. It was all I ever knew. I got my education, but above all, I had to stay in the Word of God, had to let God. I remember I was doing a songwriter. I used to do the songwriter clinic every year at the National Quartet Convention. And one year it was me and I think Bill and Larry Gatlin. And somewhere in there, they were asking us how we got ideas. And Larry said, well, Jeff and them, they have an advantage over the rest of us. And one of the students said, why? And he said, well, they have a handbook. And I knew exactly where he was going. And one of the students in the audience said, what's the name of the book? And Larry said, the Bible. He said, man, I know that boy stays in the Bible. He said, and there's thousands of songs hidden in there. He said, country artists don't have a song book. We got to wait for somebody to get drunk or get divorced. He said, but they got a song book. And I thanked him about that several times later because he's right. We've got the Word of God that if we'll seek him and seek his Word and look in there are songs and sermons and thoughts and lessons hidden between every line. Just prepare yourself for whatever God's bringing your way. You just prepare yourself so the Lord can use you.
Yeah,
Nice.
absolutely. Absolutely. Wow.
So, go ahead, Arthur.
No, it's good.
Okay. Jeff, certainly within those 25 years of teaching school, you came home one Friday evening from school and just had a hard week, and you said to yourself, you felt like picking up the phone and calling somebody and said, let's put a group together. How many did that cross your mind from time to time? I mean,
Well,
or I guarantee you'd go to a local concert and Ed O'Neill or somebody like that would walk down that to you afterwards and they'd look at you with that voice and turn that head and say, Jeff, when are you getting back on that stage? You know where your heart is.
Brother, you are a smart young man. You don't know how many times. If I went to a concert, Claude would always call me on stage, or Ed, whoever it was, Mark, they'd call me up to sing a song, and I'd go home. On the ride home, I'd be so quiet. My wife would say, honey, you miss it, don't you? And I'd say, you just don't know. And I thought about it so many times. And after I came off the road, I can't tell you the people that called me and said, I'll be the financial backing. Let me put together a group. And I said to them, listen, if I was going to sing and could say, I'd be right there where I was. I wouldn't have left. I said, why do you think I'd start a new group? I couldn't stay. It's just physical. I couldn't do it. But I have gotten offers all the time. Then I had a lot of churches would say, hire me, because Arthur can tell you, we meet so many wonderful pastors traveling. So many pastors call me and offer me minister of music or youth minister. And I just didn't feel that. I had one pastor from Texas call me and said he and his board had met and the Lord had showed them that I was going to be their pastor. And it was a huge church and they wanted me to be a youth pastor. And I said, well, let me pray about it and talk to my wife. And I called him a couple of days later, and I said, brother, I appreciate it. He said, but we felt like the Lord told us that you. I said, well, we can be sincere, but sometimes be sincerely wrong. Sometimes we just miss it. I said, I know I do. I said, but the Lord just not leading me. That's not what he's leading me to do. And so I've just tried. Lord knows I make mistakes and I make the wrong call sometimes, but I try all I can to follow his leading and just try to stay in his will. Because I've learned, we can make plans on our own, but it's the Lord who decides what we're going to do.
Right.
Nice. Good stuff.
Yep.
Hey guys, I want to tell y'all this. I apologize interrupting you, Darren, but
No, you're fine. Go ahead.
This came to my mind. Of course, we recorded so many songs. I'm so proud of all. Canaan Land was never really my favorite, but the Lord used it the most. But it's been recorded. Last count they gave me, it had been recorded by a little over 700 groups. But I got an email this week from Japan. And the lady said that doing this COVID thing, they've just been seeking the Lord. And she said they had bought a Gaither video. And she said the song Canaan Land has become our theme song. And we're singing it every night. And I thought, dear Lord, over there singing in Japan, I don't even know what they're saying. But I tell you, one of my favorite, I got so many that I could tell you. But one was I got several years ago from a missionary. He and his young wife had been called to the ministry, gone to Zimbabwe. And he said, Brother Jeff, we were scared out of our mind. We sat there that first night. The camp meeting said, with thousands of Africans there ready to have church. He said, and I was sitting there holding my darling wife's hands, just I think one was 23 and 122, scared to death. And he said, we would just pray. I was going to have to preach in a minute. And he said, God, just give me something. Give me something to make me feel at home. Give me something to comfort me and let me know we've made the right decision. He said, the choir took off singing a song, and his wife leaned over and said, I don't know their tongue, their language, said, but that tune sounds familiar. He said, we kept listening. He said, when they got to the chorus, they went into English and they were singing, Canaan Land is just in sight. Wow. He said, brother, I took about 3 laps around that tabernacle and I was ready to preach. I said, well, but to imagine, I know I am nothing and nobody. And a little old country fella from North Carolina, the way the Lord would take and use me, it blows my mind. It's just amazing. Nothing I've done, nothing I'm worthy of, but for him to let me even call myself friend with people like Arthur, to know you there. And I'm so blessed. I'm so blessed. I don't know how it'll take me 1,000 years just to thank him when I get there.
Jeff, you're a master storyteller. Me and Arthur's done this 130 something times with different folks, and I love talking to you. When I was doing my homework on you before we talked today, there's another song you wrote that's probably one of the most direct titles of any song you've ever wrote. And I read the story behind it, and I didn't prepare to ask you this today, but after talking to you, you've got to tell me the story of Can the World See Jesus in You, and that little old man, that homeless man
Lord,
that you were talking to.
Every song has a story, and that particular one, Darren, I never intended to tell. And we had sang the song for the record company, and they were like, oh, it's okay. But then we were getting ready to do a live album, and we decided to sing. And when I just felt led to tell that story. And when I told that story that night, the head of the record company called me the next day and said, that song's going to be a single. You need to tell that story every night. But it's amazing. I was home that week, that Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and that morning I got up and done my normal duties. And at that time, all the sodas and we call them drinks in East North Carolina, they were all in glass bottles, Yeah. And our garage was full of bottles, and my wife had been after me for weeks, honey, do something with these bottles. Take these bottles to the store, throw them in the trash, just get all these bottles out of the garage. And that morning, like I normally do, in my prayer time, I said, Lord, use me today. If I can touch anybody, please don't let me miss it, Lord. And I had left home, had run by the office and run by the bus to get my suits, going to take them to the cleaners. And I was riding down the old country road, and I looked, and there was an old gentleman, a black gentleman on a bicycle, and he had a little wagon tab behind it. And I looked, and I said, that man is picking up bottles and cans. So I pulled over, and I said, sir, how you doing? And we talked for a minute. And he said, how you doing? I said, great. I said, you're picking up bottles and cans? He said, yeah. My wife and I need some groceries. We don't have money to pay the electric bill. We're just barely getting by. And I said, well, sir, I got something you might want. And I opened my trunk, and there the bottles come rolling out of there. And I looked up, and that poor old man, the tears was running down his face. And he said, "Are you going to give me these?" I said, "Yes, sir." I said, "If you can't get them in your basket there, we'll put you back and I'll take you home." And he reached up and wrapped he was filthy, bless his heart, been in the ditch all morning, and just held me for a minute. And then he backed up and he said, "Son, I can see Jesus in you." And I'm gonna tell you, I couldn't get to the piano fast enough that day. We unloaded them bottles. I didn't even go into town. I went back to the house and went to the piano and turned on my recorder and just prayed God give it to me. And he started letting it flow. And I had it. It was written in about 8 or 10 minutes. But you just got to, like say, be prepared. That morning, I just prayed, God, if you can use me, and He'll use anybody like that. If we'll be a willing vessel, if we'll just yield ourselves to Him. We don't know the opportunities God gives us each day, and we miss them. I know I do. I know I miss some of them sometime. But if the Lord will help me to recognize those opportunities, and that old man will never know what he did for me that day. And then it was up for Song of the Year. It was in top 10 for 2 years in a row. And we, for 5 Song of the Year, we were just so blessed to know how God used it. And, again, it wasn't me. It was just those pop bottles and that precious old gentleman. I'm so glad I went that way that day. I'll tell you that.
That's cool.
That's awesome.
Awesome.
So many times, Jeff, singing and loving to sing. And, we think the singing is the biggest part of what we do.
Yeah,
but
that's right.
Sometimes it really isn't.
It really is.
The singing part is what God gives us, you know what I mean? We enjoy
Arthur,
that part, but it's
I remember one time, Foxy produced several of our albums, and for several years there, I might do a song on an album as far as singing, but I didn't sing a lot. I just sung baritone. And one time we were in the studio and Fox come to me and said, "I want to talk with you a minute." And I said, "Okay." And we walked outside. And he said, "Why aren't you singing more songs?" And I said, "Well, Fox, I'm no ways a singer. Lawrence is a powerhouse." And I said, "I certainly can't sing tenor." And he said, "Let me tell you something, son. You may not be the best or the strongest," he said, "but you have an anointing on your life, and you have a way of communicating with the crowd." He said, "I've seen the way." He said, "You need to sing." And the Lord sent him that day because it gave me a confidence that I did not have. And so from then on, I'd go to Ken and I'd say, "Ken, I'll do 2 or 3 songs." He'd say, "Absolutely." So I started singing more, and it was all because of Foxy. He didn't miss it that day. He took what the Lord gave him to give to me, and it was a nugget of gold to me. It meant the world that he said that to me. And I still can't sing no better than I did, but I'm willing to try more. I can tell you that.
Nice.
That's awesome.
Nice.
I'm so blessed.
Jeff, you've been blessed. You've wrote songs. You've sang songs. You've been in a group. I mean, I look at it, you were the original trio before Greater Vision, before Brian Free, before the Bishops, before those parts. But then as you were the original trio, you decided eventually to add a bass singer.
Yeah.
What brought that on? I mean,
well, that was
you said you like traveling with 3 people. Did you just, fall in love with a bass singer and say, "Hey, you need to jump on," or people just decided they didn't want to sing with you no more, so you got to grab a bass singer? What happened there?
Well, that was after I left. And
Okay.
when I left, Ken and I had been together 20 some years then, and Ken and I sat down and talked, and we talked with Becky and we talked with the record company, and Ken said, "Yeah, I'm gonna tell you, it's not gonna be the same." And I told him, I said, "Guys, y'all gonna be fine. I don't make a difference." But anyway, they decided if we were gonna make a change, let's make a drastic change. Yeah. And Ron Bright, who used to be with the Harvesters, incredible bass singer. Anytime we were down in South Carolina or anywhere in that area, Charlotte, Ron would come out and sing with us. And so Ken called Ron and said, "Ron, would you been interested in going on the road?" And so he did. So we decided when I left to really make a change. And Ken still says to this day, he don't know if he did the right thing. He said, because we were known as a trio. I remember one time Brock Spears said to us up in Maryland, he said, "There's 2 things I love about you boys." I said, "What?" He said, "Number 1, y'all don't have a bass singer, so I ain't got no competition." He said, "Number 2, you don't have a drummer." He said, "Most drummers don't know nothing but rock music." Well, a few years later, Ken's son came on board, and Brock come to me and said, "Well, you've added a drummer." I said, "Yeah, we have, Brock." He said, "But somebody taught that boy right. He don't play like a rock singer." I said, "Well, I taught him, Brock." He said, "Okay, he's fine then." I said, "Well, thank the Lord."
That's hilarious. That's hilarious.
Oh, that's awesome.
Jeff, what do you think about the change in gospel music since you've been gone?
Well, I know, all things change except for Jesus. He's the same yesterday, today, and forever. But things change, and I look at gospel music and even country music has changed so much.
Yeah.
And even at my church now, so many of the songs we've got. When I was talking with the music director, when I wouldn't take the job as the music director several years ago, I recommended a gentleman, and they hired him, and I help him all I can. But Eric and I were talking the other day, and Eric said, I have to try to fit in so many songs because all this new music, the middle-aged older folks don't like them. He said, and to keep the young people in, I got to do some of their stuff. So he's trying to do a little bit of everything.
Yeah.
But it has just changed. And I know Arthur can tell you this, and of course he's still out there in it, but it has changed so much from the years ago. The groups, the way everything's done, where it's done, the recording, everything's done different now.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about today that all my years on the road, Martha, remember those days? We never had a cell phone. We had to find a truck stop to get a phone, to call home, or we knew where every phone was at every truck stop, at every restaurant. I remember the first phone I saw, Tim Riley, with Gold City. I was on the bus one day, and Tim said, let me show you what I got. And it was a great big old bag phone, and he had it back there in the back of the bus. I said, what is that? He said, a telephone. And I'll tell my kids now, I never had cell phones to call home with mom or text or anything. Everything has changed in technology. Recording is so different now.
Yeah, I mean, this podcast, for instance.
That's right, Darren.
People can listen to it 3 o'clock in the morning or 3 o'clock in the afternoon. It don't make no difference.
You're exactly right, brother. That's a good point. Everything has changed so much. Groups will still call me and ask for material. I don't write near as much as I did, but so many of them want material that's totally different. And I'll just say, well, I write Southern gospel. That's what I do. And well, I want this and I want that. And you can write it. And I say, well, I could. I remember one time before I come off the road, and I love country music. I love it. Good. But I remember they, RCA talked to me and offered me a pretty nice contract. They said, but we want you to write this and write that. And, I thought, well, there were a couple of country artists sitting there with me, and I said, well, I'll need to pray about it. And he said, what? And I said, yeah, I just let me pray about it and see what the Lord says and talk to my wife. And he said, well, I can't believe you. He said, I've got this check ready. And I said, well, and when I got up to leave, and I turned around and I said, no, I don't have to pray about it. I said, I could probably benefit greatly financially from this, but it's just not what I do. I said, nothing wrong with country music. I love to write my wife a love song now and then. I said, but that's just not where God called me. And one of the country artists, she stood up and said, Jeff, I told him that's what you were going to say. And I said, well, I got to follow my heart. I might have just thrown a lot of money out the window, but I got to do what the Lord's called me to do. And so now I look at how the music has changed and how different it is. And that's why I admire so much groups like the Kingdom, Air, Arthur, and them. They're staying true to what has always been Southern gospel music. And man, I admire that, because the world don't want to stay the same, and the industry don't want to stay the same. But you got groups that are standing true, and I can't say enough about that.
Awesome stuff. Arthur, what you got?
Jeff, buddy, I love you, man. I love how God has used you over the years, not just singing, but just in real life. And I think it'd be hard to put it all together till we get over there, and the Lord shows us our life back at us, and how we've touched people we didn't even think about. And I appreciate you, appreciate your life and your ministry, and it just means so much to have you on here and get you to share some of this with some folks, because I know there's people that's needing it, that needs to hear it. I needed to hear it.
Yeah. Arthur, you're too kind, my friend. You're way too kind.
Well,
and I apologize again to y'all for.
Don't even start that mess. Don't even start that mess. It's funny, and Jeff, here's what I love about doing this. And Arthur will tell you the truth. We've had the best laid plans in the world to come in here and sit down and talk to people. I'll give you an example. One of the best shows, me and Arthur was talking about this the other night on the phone when we were talking about the interview with you coming up. We had everything planned out for Mark Trammell before he came on. Okay? Go back and listen to that tape of Mark Trammell, and
I've heard it.
You see how God took a hold of that thing. And Mark was telling us things he ain't never told nobody in this world. You know what I'm saying?
Isn't that something?
Go back and listen to that tape of us and Peg McCamey when she started talking about her stepson. Okay, that she never shared on tape. Go back and listen to the late Charlie Daniels start quoting Revelations. And the 86-year-old man that loved Jesus, that was going to make his crossing within 9 months from the time he sit and listen to that. Go back and listen to, T. Graham Brown talking about, hey, Lord, help me turn that wine back into water instead of the water into wine.
And
so,
boy, did he get a cut or what on Beulah land?
Man,
Lord have mercy.
And I get to sit here as America's greatest fan and just listen to these folks, and it doesn't matter who it is, and talk to them and just be blessed. And man, I want to say thank you for telling this stories. We got to have a little fun on top of this in this world. We got to. Okay. Yeah. Now, I always like to put people on the spot, Jeff, and you ain't gonna be no different. Okay. so Arthur likes when I do this. Okay. So here's what we're gonna do, Jeff. Okay. Here's what we're gonna do. Now, you got to take friendships out of this, and you got to take the love out of it and all that kind of stuff. And we're going to talk.
Lord, what's coming here?
We're going to talk Jeff Gibson, the pure music teacher, right now. Are you ready for this?
Oh, Lord.
Jeff Gibson, the baritone singer, is starting a new group. We're not even going to use Heaven Bound because you got members there that you'd have to lean on, okay? So Jeff Gibson's starting a new group. Let's just call it the Canaan Land is Just in Sight Quartet. Okay. Jeff's going
Somebody will have that for the week's out.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. Jeff's going to sing baritone and play bass in this group.
Wait a minute. I was going to hire Arthur to do that.
Well, okay. There you go.
Arthur can do lead, baritone, tenor, but it don't matter.
It doesn't matter if it's from the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000, 2010, or 2021.
Good grief.
What three are you surrounding yourself with in a quartet, Jeff?
Lord have mercy. Well, I would definitely want Arthur on stage with me somewhere. And I tell you that dear Anthony Berger, you won't get his piano picking is just unbelievable. Yeah. And bass singers is just so many. I love Ed, I love Yance, I love Ray Dean. But I tell you, one of my favorite singers on earth, I just love to hear Foxy sing. Elder's just, boy, he had a voice that would melt you. Yeah. And tenor, I love little Ernie. Ernie just, it's with people like Ernie, it's hard to separate the talent and their heart, because his heart is so, he sells you and buys you with just his heart. And then when you add his talent, it's like, my Lord. But Ernie is there's so many incredible tenors in the baritone. Mark is just such a great group man. Mark is one of them guys. He's like Rick Buzz. When Rick was with us, some are just the greatest group men in the world. They're ready to travel. They're ready to run the record table. They're ready to drive the bus. They do anything you want. So when you can round yourself people like them, man, there's so many wonderful guys out there. I'd have to hire you as PR, Darren, because you can definitely do that, man.
I don't know about that. We you know what? I will tell you this, and we ain't even mentioned this today, Arthur, and I'm gonna throw this out there. Jeff, I do this for fun, believe it or not. We really do. Arthur and I do it for fun. Yeah, we've got a few pillows out of it from time to time, but we do it for fun.
That's right. And that's the way I was on the road. I told, I think I was telling Arthur, I told Bill when I said, Bill, I may never get in the Hall of Fame or anything like that. I said, but to know that the time I had, the fun I had, and the way the Lord used me, that's what matters. That's just like when I, Lord, y'all gonna have to stop me. I'm rattling on again.
No, you're fine.
But when I was up for my second or third year teaching, I was up for Teacher of the Year. I won Teacher of the Year for my school. Then I won it for the county. Then I was up for the state. And so all these big wigs come in and observe your class. And they were like, my Lord, said, y'all have so much fun in your class. And said, you don't have any discipline problems and everything's great. And they said, tell us your secrets. And they all five of them had their pads out and they were writing. And I said, well, I can give you all this educational goop that you want to hear. I said, but do you want me to tell you the truth? What the secret is? And they said, yeah, what's the truth? I said, every morning when I walk in this class, I have a bottle of oil and I walk to each desk and I anoint each desk and I anoint my door and I anoint the door of the school building and I walk around the school every single morning. And they just stood until the two ladies, tears are running down. And the doctor, I won't call his name, but he looked at me and said, but we want to know what the secret is. And one of the other doctors took him by the arm and said, "That is the secret." He said he had nailed it on the head. And I said, "Guys, y'all just got to understand, I can't do this on my own. It's not what I do, but I trust in the Lord every day." I said, "I give my students to him and I pray over them every morning." And they said, "You pray over them every morning?" I said, "When I walk in my class, I don't sit down until I pray it on every desk." And I truly believe that God was so faithful to me. And that's why we had fun. We had a great time, but I put it in God's hands. I put it in God's hands. The county told me when I retired there that they looked back and they said most teachers have 20 to 40 write-ups a year, kids sent to suspension, kids sent to timeout. You have never written up a single kid in 25 years. I said, "Look, I just give it to God." I said, "If they don't do right, have the angels whop them over the head." And he just laughed.
Awesome.
But I just give it to God. I always have, because if I don't, I'm gonna make a mess. Now I'll tell you, I'll mess up on my own, but He don't make no messes. So
That's awesome.
mm.
That's
Wow.
awesome. Well, I want to brag a little bit and brag on the Lord. Arthur, you know this. Jeff, I don't know if you know this or not, but Arthur and I, Southern Gospel News Podcast, feedspot.com, which ranks podcasts all across the world, ranked us the #1 gospel music, not just
Praise
Southern
the
gospel
Lord,
music,
man.
but the #1 gospel music podcast in the world. And
Wow.
when we looked at that list, there was people like Shane Daly of Daly and Vincent, and has a gospel
Man.
podcast, Black Gospel Groups, which
Wow.
we all know. And Arthur and I got to be #1. And people say, "What do you attribute it to?" And it's stuff like what you've done today, Jeff, is just drawn back and told the truth and
Wow.
spoke from your heart
Hmm.
and just shared. And we call it reality radio, so to speak. We're not, there's some great program radio stations out there and there's some great hosts out there, but we just get to freewheel it, so to speak.
There you go.
It's almost like Hamill on stage leading music. He just freewheeled it. You know what? Wouldn't you agree, Arthur? I mean, it just amazes me each and every time.
Well, I'm gonna tell you, I have done like Arthur and like you, Darian, hundreds and hundreds of interviews.
Yeah.
But honestly, the Lord is my witness. I don't know when I've had more fun and more of a blessing than I have today. This has just been, look, I'll do it every day for you. Y'all have been, this has been awesome. I ain't kidding you. That DJ that called me the other day, Arthur, no, Les Butler. Les called a few weeks ago and said, "Jeff, can we do an interview?" I said, "Yeah." And we had a good time. But man, I'm gonna tell you right now, Lord have mercy. This has been like camp meeting and fun at the same time. It's just,
Yes.
You know what, Jeff, and I'll close with this. And we don't tell a lot of people this, but I'll just tell you and tell the whole world. You see, Arthur and me don't care if we talking to church folks, because it's real easy to get in that. It's real easy to get in that tent of the church group and talk to each other and love on each other because we're all in the same club.
right.
But if me and you were, let's just say we were over in Rocky Mount this afternoon.
You know where Rocky Mount is.
Yeah, I know where Rocky Mount is.
That's
yeah.
where I was born. I can't
Nice.
believe, how about that?
So let's just say me and you were in Rocky Mount today, okay? And you and I walked into the back room of the American Legion in downtown Rocky Mount. And we walked around that bar and there was 15 or 20 guys and girls in there. And we said, "How many of y'all love gospel music?" We know about 80% of them would raise their hand and say, "I know Amazing Grace. I know A Man Who Can. I know How Great Thou Art. And I know this, that, and other." Or my granny was a member of, Little Hollow Baptist Church, or, Rocky Mount First Baptist, or, Cathedral Church of God, or whatever church we're just making up names of right now. Guess what? These stories that you gave us today are weighing on those type of people's hearts and in those type of people's lives. And that's who we're talking to. And that's who we want to talk to.
Amen.
And thank you for being a part and just following the Lord today. And you don't have to make an excuse. You don't have to apologize. I'm just thankful that we had Jeff Gibson on today, because I needed it today more than I needed it last year when we first thought about getting you on. And Arthur can say the same exact thing. Can't you, Arthur?
Yep. Oh, yeah, absolutely.
My privilege. I thank y'all. And listen, anytime I can help, I'd love to be on. Y'all are absolutely wonderful. This is a great ministry, and I'm honored to be a part of it.
Thank you. Jeff Gibson with us on SGNP. We're going to take a quick break and we'll be back.
Can the world see Jesus in you? Are you walking in the footsteps of the one that you call Lord? Are you living each day by His holy word, surrendered completely? Are you His through and through? Can the world see Jesus? Can they see Jesus in you? Can the world see Jesus in you? Can they see His love in the things that you do? Are you living the life? Are you faithful and true? Can the world see Jesus in you? If your neighbor has a burden, will you carry the load? Will you help some poor stranger as you travel life's road? Will you reach out to someone just to see what you can do? Can the world see my Jesus? Can they see Jesus in you? Can the world see Jesus in you? Can they see His love in the things that you do? Are you living the life? Are you faithful and true? Can the world see Jesus in you? Can the world see Jesus in
Whoa, I can't hardly breathe, Arthur.
That was a great interview.
Yeah. You know, when you talk about, we've all been through life and God's changed the trajectory, and that's my school book word for the day. But God's changed our pattern. I mean, the way He changed Jeff's life, but Jeff, you know, it would have been real easy. The whole time I'm sitting there listening to Jeff talk about breaking his back in 3 places, the whole time I'm thinking how he loves to sing gospel music and get in front of that crowd. And he loves the brotherhood of the music. And, you know, he loves Arthur Rice, Ray Dean Reese, you know, so many of the hoppers, so many of the people. And to be removed from that and be placed in an isolation box, basically teaching school in something that he trained to do, but yet the way he embraced it and the way he used his ministry to impact it, says a lot about Jeff Gibson, the man, Arthur. What do you think?
Yeah, it does. It does. And, I've talked to him before, and he's like any of us. He's human, and you go, okay, what are you up to, God? I know you've got something going on. I don't understand it. You know what I love to do, and now I don't get to do it, but why? And we had when we look back, that's when we see how God used us and used him, and boy, what an encouragement.
And let me say this in all transparency, okay? This wasn't the first time we reached out to Jeff and asked him to be a guest.
Yeah.
And a lot of times we've asked a lot of people who, for whatever reason, have declined, and they've had good reason. But I'm so glad the first time we asked Jeff, he declined. And then he came on today to tell his story. And it wasn't that he had anything to hide. It was the fact that this was the timing and this was the moment that people needed to hear this today. I believe that with all shout about. You think about this, Arthur. I think about and I said this during that conversation, the conversations we've had with various people, and I mean, they're always right on time. I never will forget. I never will forget you and I, the first time we had Squire Parsons on.
Yeah.
We literally asked 2 questions, and I don't think we talked for the next 25 minutes.
Nope.
And it wasn't that, and I'm bad to interrupt and throw something out there, especially when people are rambling. It wasn't rambling. It was straight from the throne room of God. And I felt very similar today with Jeff Gibson that, you know what, maybe there's a teacher in Ohio that's a believer and just not bold enough to take a stand like Jeff was. And Jeff saying, hey, this is how it worked for me. Maybe it'll work for you the same way.
Yeah. Yeah.
Awesome. Awesome stuff.
That's right.
Awesome stuff. Man, we could talk about that stuff all day. Talk about it all day. Canaan land is just in sight. I bet that's cool. I heard this story one time, and then we got to talk about the Kingdom Marriage before you get out of here, because y'all got some great news. But somebody asked Bill Gaither and I read this article. He said, when were you the most excited? And he said, we were in Africa in the middle of nowhere, and a little group of African children got up, and I couldn't understand a word of what they were singing, but they were singing Because He Lives in their native tongue. And he said, I couldn't help but stand there and cry. And to write a song like Jeff did, Canaan Land is Just in Sight, and tons of others. And when I was looking at that song, and Jeff said it was recorded over 600 times, if it was recorded 600 times, I promise you it was recorded in gospel music circles 6,000 times, because of all the little, the little local groups that don't report what they record. You know what I'm saying? I mean, think about that Jeff will never get his BMI or ASCAP royalties off of. Not that we're worried about that at this point, but what a blessing that must be to him to have a song like that, and to have other songs like that. So, anyway, man, just wow. Just wow. Well, buddy, we've always got to talk about our home group, the Kingdom Heirs.
Yeah.
And man, great things are happening. You guys, you got a new tenor singer. Tell us.
We do. We got a brand new tenor singer. He's been with us now for about 9 days, and just doing an incredible job. That whole story is a story of its own right there. It's just, we looked all winter long, and of course our buddy Dusty Barrett filled in for us this winter. And
how many applications did you get, by the way? Just out of curiosity.
We didn't get a ton. I mean, we kind of went this one kind of quietly, and I think and it worked out good, because I think with when we got Dusty to fill in, we kind of knew that Dusty couldn't take it, just just logistics didn't work out. But he was so willing to come with us to help us this winter. And I think when we did that, it kind of quietened everybody up, because they just assumed that he was the guy.
Yeah.
And which would have been fine with me. It's just God just didn't see it, and so it just wasn't in His will. And so we kind of reached out, to some folks, and boy, it was like it just wasn't. The ones we auditioned was like, yeah, it's okay. It just wasn't, just didn't fit, and or just wasn't what I was looking for. And so Mike Speck reminded me to check with Danny Murray at Lee University, see if they had any guys down there, maybe in the choir, and that might be interested. And so I reached out to Danny and asked him. He said, just right off, man. He said, I got your young man. In fact, he's from just over here in Candler, just Candler, North Carolina, just across the mountain over here. But he's been in college for 4 years, so he's kind of off the radar. He once I mentioned his name, everybody was like, "Oh yeah, we know exactly who that is." But he sang with the Voices of Lee down there, and Jeff made a great reference as far as preparing for God to use you. And if Jacob's 24, he graduates in May from Lee, and if Jacob would have come to us before he went to college, before he had the experience of working with the Voices of Lee and working under Danny, he wouldn't have been ready. Because I kind of already said, I really don't want to, I'm to the age where I didn't want to raise another kid. And I didn't want to, I didn't want to.
You got two at home you got to deal with part-time.
Exactly. I thought I'd already raised my two kids. But, Jacob went to college down there, and God prepared him for what was coming. Jacob had no idea. He didn't know what he was going to do when he got out of school. He didn't have a job lined up. He wanted to. He's got a degree in advertising, but he couldn't find anything. He's like, man, I thought I'm gonna have to move back home because I can't find anything to make a living off of. And but that wasn't what God had in store. And but God had prepared him through college, and it wasn't easy. That's a tough thing, boy, singing with the voices. I mean, Danny's tough on them kids, but they learn, Yeah. And God prepared him for this time, and he came up one evening, and we just got around the piano and sung a few songs, but we just fell in love with his singing. He's different than any tenor we've ever had. He's a different singer. But boy, I tell you what, he's got a heart that people are just loving, and just a chemistry that people they just connect with him, and we are just excited for him and excited for what God's going to do with him, and I really think God's got some big things in store for him. We're glad to have him. His name is Jacob Ellison.
Jacob Ellison. Let me ask you this, Arthur.
Yep.
Now, does some of that old Hamill rub off on you when you get a new guy and you kind of pick on him and you make him sing more than normal just because he's the new guy, and you just want to put some of the load on him because, like you said, you're one of the elder statesmen now in gospel music. So he needs to carry the pail of water for a little bit. Do you do that to him?
Well, I want to feature him, and I want to show him off. I try to remember, what it was like when I was that age and coming along, and so I've been kind of easy on him, but it's easy to be that way, but it's easy to but I try to remember what I was like when at that age, and green and didn't know anything, God took care of me, so I'm just trying to take care of them.
You got any insight that any of the guys have pulled something on him that you want to tell everybody that's been funny, or is that just in-house stuff that don't happen?
Well, not yet, but he's still early.
It's still
it's still early.
Is Jeff Chapman tried to sell him a car yet? That's the next question.
No, not yet, because he just bought him a new car. So,
Well, folks, share this interview with Jeff Gibson today. Share it with somebody else. because sincerely it spoke to me. I know it spoke to you, Arthur. And the more he kept apologizing, the more I just wanted to tell him to hush, to go on. Go on. I needed this. It's 4:00 in the afternoon when we started recording this, and I needed this before I go upstairs and start jogging numbers for the real job I have. And, and anyway, just, you need a break like this every once in a while.
Absolutely.
Well, buddy, I appreciate it. And as always, let me ask you a quick question. What's wrong with living right anyway?
Not a thing.
Not a thing. You've been listening to SGNP.
SGNP is excited you chose to listen today. If you'd kindly leave a remark and rating in the podcast remarks section, we surely would appreciate it. Please share with a friend or family member. Look for us on Facebook, Twitter, and our new website, southerngospelnewspodcast.com.